Okay, let's see which version of stuff you have up there. Do you have the opening slide there for IDXC 2025?
Yes, sir. Looks good.
Okay, so this last week I was down in California and down at Visalia for the International DX Convention. So this is what their website looks like there as far as the opening page. It's a pretty cool venue there, and it's kind of shrunk a little bit in the last few since COVID, but before, I mean, you would easily have 900 people there, and this was an opportunity for DXers and contesters all over the world to get together and rub shoulders with each other. So it's an international DX convention, opportunity for hams around the world to meet and discuss the past and future DXing and contesting. So these are all the big, heavy hitters, the guys, the shakers, the guys that make things happen. Convention is about 2.5 days long, held in Visalia, California, yearly sponsored by Northern California DX Club and Southern California DX Club. Um, and anyway, so this program is gonna it's not it's just not gonna walk through a bunch of individual programs and list a bunch of stuff. I'm actually going to share some of the things that have gone into some of the programs, so it'll be a much more educational program rather than just sit back and be entertained by what I say. So the neat thing about this is an opportunity to hear about all the backstories of many of the high-end, mid-level expeditions out there, because these are the guys that actually did the stuff. It's not like watching a website. It's not like watching a YouTube video about what went on. These are an opportunity so you can talk to the guys that made the history and find out the good things that happen and the bad things that happen and what needs to get fixed the next time they try doing things. Uh, so you also get to talk with some of the top contesters. That's one of the things that has kind of stroked my interest recently is how do these contesters get some of these super insane scores? I mean, like 8 and 9 and 10 times what I could even come close to. And these guys, every time when they get out there, they just have rack up these super, super big scores that I have no idea how they do it. So it's kind of nice to talk to them, find out how they do it. So it's also a great opportunity to this venue isn't so much about talking about new electronics and stuff like that, but they always have the latest and greatest stuff there. You also get to see a lot of the good high-end stuff. You get to talk to some of the engineers and the people that actually are designing some of this and making this stuff work. So the U.S. has about four of these guys that are really top of the world, not the US, top of the world contesters. And believe me, worldwide, there are a lot. I mean, the Russians have some great contesters out there. Italy has some great contesters. There are some super insane contesters. So one of the guys that was there was Dan Craig, N7MJ. He's out of California. He's a big dude, and but very knowledgeable. The interesting thing is that he really knows contesting, and he has this really good feel and flavor, and he knows how all this stuff works and how to get these little edges and how to trim a little fat here and there. But the interesting thing is that when it comes to knowing technical details about how to wire up radios and how to make some of this stuff works, he's a big zero for it. He doesn't understand it, but he knows contesting. And you would think that the two would need to go together, but that's not the case. So he's also, anytime you see WRTC, That is the top echelon of contesting. There's a whole bunch of prerequisites you have to go through in order to even get invited to this championship. So he has got, I don't remember how many times he's got the world championship out there, but anybody that competes in that is one of those guys you kind of bend down and nod to. It's really cool. So I'm sure most of us have heard SO2R, um, or SO1R. That stands for Single Operators Single Radio, and that's what we're all accustomed to doing. So when you get into some of these contesting, you have guys that are operating two radios at the same time. Two radios. You have one radio feeding into one ear, the other second radio is feeding into the other ear. There's times when they even step into having three radios that they're operating. And for that radio, it comes into both ears. So you know what radio it's connected to. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever heard, I don't know if you've ever heard, you can raise your hand if you have, but have you ever heard of 2BSIQ? 2BSIQ. That is a mode. It stands for two bands. So you're working two bands. So that means you got two radios out there. Synchronize, interleave. So that means you're synchronizing, you're transmitting on one band, you're receiving on another band, then you flip it, and you're now receiving on a new band and transmitting on the other old band. So you're actually interleaving it. So this is a method when you're working a pileup, so you can literally double, almost, not quite, but you can literally almost double the number of cues. So this is the way that if you're running a single radio on a single band, there's an upper limit on what you can possibly get for a contest. So these guys are running two radios, one in each ear, and they're interleaving a CW contest or song for transmit and receive, and they're screaming along there just like it was nothing. Well, it actually isn't for nothing, but it does take some special equipment to end up doing that synchronizing between the two radios. Um, and so contesting is a radio sport. And when I'm talking about a radio sport, I'm talking about these guys are competing at the Olympic level, at Olympic level. So that means you have to train for it. You have to learn how to flop your ear back and forth and figure out and keep everything straight to know which paddle and which where you're logging things. So there's a really neat feature in DX Log called Morse Runner. Morse Runner is will go through there and create an environment where you have one QSO coming into one ear, a separate QSO coming into the other ear, and allows you to practice flipping back and forth, back and forth. If you make, and you're also logging it on the DX logging system. So it allows you to practice the craft of running the SBS, excuse me, the two, I'll say that again, the 2BSIQ process. And it's built in such a way where you can set some upper limits and some starting limits and stuff like that. So if you get up into the upper limits and you start making errors, it'll back off the run rate a little less. So these guys typically, and you're going to love this one, Scott. These guys are typically ripping along between 42 to 51 words per minute there. So they have a pretty high clip. So that means you're only going to work and talk to these guys if you can try and keep up with them. They're not going to drop down to the 12 words a minute for at the beginning level there. So this is one of the ways that they practice to be able to, and they're practicing this for weeks running up to a major contest. Another thing you have to think about, well, what do they do for physical conditioning? Because they're sitting in a chair for 24 hours running this stuff. with very, very few breaks in this. So they have long, long run times. So you have to make, and some play times they're having to fly to a contest station. So in a different time zone, different part of the world. So you have to plan on how, when you're getting there, what you do to get your the circadian rhythm back in sync for the local area there. You have to think about what kind of nourishments, as far as, use, they like high protein types of food for their eating going into this. When they're um, in the contest, um, and you're having to take nourishment. They're very careful about not getting over caffeinated or under caffeinated, and the types of drinks that they don't just slip, drink a bunch of Red Bull. They're very careful on what kind of drinks and what they're using for calorie intake. So this is thinking about Olympian champion on what he has to do to take and compete on a world stage like that. Pretty cool. And this is stuff I had no idea about. I didn't know beans about this. I just knew that these guys had some insane run weights as far as the number of contacts. So until you get around to looking talking to these guys, and or hear a program about it, you wouldn't never know the difference. So this is what kind of their rigs look like. You can see that they have two high-end radios there. You got keys on both sides there. Um, you notice the guy right in the center? That's an ICOM 7300. That was his third radio, and he used that for doing searching to see if other bands were open. And at times, he was running three radios at one time. You can't really do an interleaving process doing that. So it was like, maybe the band had dropped out or something like that, and he wanted a third band that he needed to pick up on. So let's look at some run rates, and this is these are some theoretical and what people have done. So that lower set of bars down there, using that 2BS IQ for CW, the theoretical max is 400 to 410 Qs per hour. If you're a single guy out there running flat out on just running one radio, one operator, the theoretical max on that is about 300 Qs per hour. So let's move up a little, back up to the top set of things there. So that line there is talking about what people have done, the practical aspect of it. So the absolute best they have ever got for a 1 hour run on the 2B SIO IQ on CW is 387 Qs per hour. So that's getting pretty damn close to that theoretical max of 400. And so they're always trying to figure out how what they can tweak and what they could do to do better in order to get to that max rate up there. And if you're a single operator, I have to give it to a guy that was managed to knock out 275 Qs per hour. I mean, that is really flying. So Scott, that should give you some idea about where you want to go in the future there, as far as uh, I also Ron there, as far as working CW, what you could potentially do. Trying to use some of those different modes. The stuff over on the right hand side that shows what you can do on single sideband if you're doing it. If Anna was here, I'd tease her about some of these here and see if she could meet some of these expectations. So it's kind of interesting on single operator, one radio for single sideband. The max is 500. I was surprised to find out that on single sideband you could work more stations than you were on CW. I thought CW was always the fastest, but it's not. And right now, the best that anybody has ever done is in the 470 areas of per hour for a single sideband one radio. Okay, change the subject here. This is what's known as a RIB, and it stands for remote in a box. So, oh, let me back. let's see. I think I also mentioned that Craig was at the um, um, at the get together there in Visalia. So he was approachable, very easy, very calm guy, sweet and great guy to just to talk with. And but his forte is contesting, and that's his focus in his life. So change the subject. RIB, remote in the box. This is what we've been using for these remote islands that they don't like people to get on the islands. We've been taking these boxes, dropping off on the island there, and then setting out on a ship and operating from there. The guy over on the left side there, um, that's George. I think it's AA. I think I can't remember it. I don't remember his call sign, but we'll see it in a little bit later. But this is the guy that has pretty much spearheaded. He's the guy that's been pushing on this concept, and he is basically the guy that has the money, the boats, and the drive to make all of this stuff happen. So he's the driving force on where we've gone with the rib. So let's talk about what the rib really is. So right square in the middle of that slide there, you have a rib. So in that black box there is a whole bunch of flex radio stuff, some networking stuff, power supplies, um, battery charging stuff, um, um, control stuff that sits inside that black box. So when they drop it off on an island, they connect up an antenna. They like those Honda generators out there. They are really nice and cool. And the interesting stuff is that I'm found out that from these guys that we think that those Honda generators are really very nice as far as not producing a bunch of RFI. When you take it out to one of these islands there, those things are a dirty, filthy generator, and they put lots of filtering on that piece of wire that comes into that rib with that AC. They do a lot of filtering on it. Okay, so on the receive side, they typically put up a couple antennas that are just receive only. And they take one and they'll point to Europe, and then they'll point one to North America. Well, why do they do that? So there's times where all you want to do, if you try and work North America and and uh, and Europe at the same time, the pileup is just massive, and you can't take and break things apart, even when you're working split and trying to just say North America only, or EU, or Italy only. Um, they're really hard to tear things apart. So what they found better off to do is just put together antennas that are point to one or the other direction. Also, maybe they may have one point for Asia in there, but it's just receive antennas running a preamp filter and on into your flex radio. Over on the right side, you have your transmit antenna. They love their verticals. They just always use verticals because it works out really nice when you're right next to ocean water. It just, the old RF waves just ripple right across that ocean water and does a great job of getting out all over everywhere. Now, the interesting thing that you'll notice there is that the tuner, the tuner is always at the antenna. So that means that coax going from the antenna where the tuner is back to the rib, that's all 50 ohms. 50 ohms. You're not going to get any loss. You're not going to get any heat. You're not going to have to worry about what goes on that darn coax. It's always the right impedance there. So it's really nice that they put the tuner out there at the antenna. Really important thing there. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can see from the rib, you got a directional antenna, you got an antenna that points off to a boat. And so you just drop the box off, start the generator, put up your antennas, and jump back onto your skiff and head back to your boat, and you operate that device from the boat. you're not on the land. So that means you don't have to put up tents. You don't have to, there's a whole bunch of things that I'll discuss a little bit later about that you don't have to deal with here. So this is one of those ribs setting on an island there under a nice tree to get a little bit of shade. Black box doesn't do real well when you have a whole bunch of sun beating on it. But that box is all airtight, submersible, can rain, it can do all kinds of horrible things, and you're not going to have to worry about equipment getting damaged. Now, what happens when you stuff a whole bunch of electronics that are creating lots of heat inside a confined area? You got a bunch of heat you got to get rid of. So the technology you see there on the left side there, and that standing on that little black box there, those are fans. They're using the same technology like they do on gaming computers. Gaming computers generate a lot of heat, and you got to have some way of getting rid of that heat from that processor. Same technology, same methodologies, same plumbing, just maybe a little bit bigger, but the same stuff that has been tried and true and works very well. And they understand how you scale this to get the proper BTUs out of that box. Okay, so let's think about this. You don't have to, when you have a rib sitting on an island for doing all your transmitting and receiving, um, and you're operating this thing from a boat. So what's the advantages of doing that? Well, you're not sleeping in a tent. You're not having a tent rattle back and forth with the wind blowing. You're not having to use a commode out there that's less than nice. You can take a shower on the boat. You can sleep in a bed that has sheets on it. You can have air conditioning wrapped around it. You can walk around in bare feet or flip flops. You have a nice cold beverage that you can be drinking. And you can sit there and work in a real nice climate controlled environment and not have to worry about all the stuff that you have to when you're camping. Really nice. Good alternative. So over the years, there's been a fair amount of evolution here, and you can see George here on the picture on the right. Um, and this was one of the things that he came up with. So a little kind of skiff where all the rib, generators, fuel, antennas are already pre-assembled and everything. So he just has a little outboard motor that he drives right up on shore. The tires are somewhat aggressive and it has a little drive method, so he can pull that thing right up on shore. You can see over on the picture on the right, he has his ground stake out. You don't have to have much of a ground system. Actually, from what I understand, when you're on these islands, grounding is very, very simple. And you don't have to have an 8 foot rod on everything. The other thing I'll point out, and I'll talk about it later, if you look on the picture on the right and you look in the back, right in the center between that boat, there's a Starlink antenna. And I'll get to that in a little bit here. Yeah, so his call sign was AA7JV, George. And when you start getting into some of these more recent expeditions, his name will keep popping up here. So let's do a quick look at what the inside of this looks like. So this is the whole system, both the boat and the rib that sits on the island. Draw a line down through the middle. Everything on the right is what's on the island. You can see FT8 is the big money maker for making cues these days. So he has one rib out there that has two radios, so he can run two two different bands on FT8. CW has actually kind of died out a little bit, but he has one rib for that. The bottom one is for all the phone operations. On phone, you notice at the very bottom, the radio has a PA, so it has a tailored amplifier that sits inside that rib that gives them, I think, 1,000 watts or something like that for power. And you notice on all those antennas, tuners are at the antenna, not next to the transceiver. Over on the left side there, You have four workstations that he's laid out there for different for FT8. You notice that the logging program is N1MM. So that's what we use for an awful lot of our logging, like for our 7QP event is N1MM. Everybody loves and like that. It's a great system for you doing your logging. You know, it's another thing that you see a Starlink up in the upper center part there. There's a Starlink connection there. Well, what the hell is that for? So most of these guys, like for CW and FT8, those operators are on board the boat. For voice, for single sideband, those operators are coming across that Starlink interface. So those guys, they could be in England, they could be in the US, they could be in Japan, they could be in Italy. But this also means when you're doing this type of an operation, you can, all you really need, things are evolving, things are still moving, so you don't have to have operators on board. Those operators can all be anywhere around the world. That what's on board is also getting reduced down. Where I showed you that previous picture, there's a Starlink connection there. So that means all you really need to have is technically is some technicians or some grunts to basically push a boat onto the island, set up some antennas, and crank up some generators and the operators and point the Starlink to the heavens. And that means all the operators can be around the world. You don't have the cost of moving people across the oceans and the risk of putting them in other kinds of peril when they are on land. And it makes things a whole lot simpler and more cost effective. And I'll get into some insanity on the cost ineffectivity on in a little bit. But anyway, pretty cool idea, right? More and more DX entities are on protected islands. So these DX entities, these islands, they're being protected and they're not letting people on those islands, like Heard Island. You know, there's I think a 10% tariff that Trump put on the Heard Island. There isn't any people that live on there. All there is penguins. But the last expedition that we did to Heard Island was camouflage. It was a science expedition to the island. And oh, by the way, we're going to do a little ham radio operating. So that's the only way we could have got on the island. But there are a bunch of islands, and we'll get into this a little bit more in a couple more slides, that just they will not let you get on those islands. And so this concept of using a rib has really brought it really helped us as far as getting, not having people on the island or minimizing what we put on the island, and for us to take and activate those islands. It is a huge game changer, and we're going to see more and more expeditions that are using this. Okay, so out of the rib that I talked about, there's a bunch of other variations that are coming up. So one of the ones that I think is really fascinating. I'm not going to go through all the ones that were brought up, but basically it's a mini rib. So it could be a flex radio, it could be a electrocraft K3 or K4, and K4 is pretty expensive. But a K3, they're getting some real good results. So let's say you're going off to an island, you want all your antennas and everything to be down on the beach. That always is the best place. But your hotel is back inland or in the city or something like that. Or maybe there's a hilltop behind where you are operating. You want to put your transmitters up on top of the hilltop, but everybody else is going to sit in a hotel or motel room operating it. So this little mini rib doesn't have all the extra features and stuff. Basically, it's a one-on-one for one operator, one rib that's set up on top of the or in some remote place. But it's all this line of sight RF communication on doing things. And these mini ribs are a quarter the size of the big ribs that I was showing earlier. Okay, change the subject again. Youth. Now we know that we've seen an awful lot of clubs that are either are really starving because there's not a good influx of newer hams that are coming into it, and a lot of newer hams, young people just aren't interested in it. But we know if ham radio is going to survive, we've got to figure out how to end up bridging the gap and bringing in more younger people into this hobby. So the ARL has many ham organizations that are focused, and there are many other ham associations that are focusing in on getting youth involved in ham radio. ARL has grant programs where they throw people that are going for higher education to help pay for their education. There's another real neat program for teaching teachers how to teach ham radio. So if I walk into a school and I want to want to talk to them about setting up a ham radio station at a school, well, first of all, I'm probably not going to make it through the front door. I'm probably never going to get an interview with the principal or anybody that's going to be a person that actually could make a decision on something like this. But we found that the ARL has been very effective if they elicit or get involved with teachers, and they teach teachers about ham radio. Teachers inside the school district is then able to take and create curriculum. Actually, ARL has curriculum that you just have to morph it into what's needed at the particular school and start teaching ham radio and all of the virtues of it and building a club station and getting kids involved in it. So that program has been very, very effective in getting outreach into the school systems. Another guy, Tim Duffy, K3LR. He's the guy that owns DX Engineering. So I'm sure everybody knows DX Engineering for all the ham radio parts that you want. I think we all complain about his prices always seem a bit higher. It makes you think that, gee whiz, the parts you're going to be getting are going to be all gold plated, but they're not. So we kind of wonder why, at least I've always kind of wondered why, and actually it's pretty easy to understand after you've been around the guy a few times what's really going on. Is that he channels a huge amount of money to like these expeditions. Virtually every single expedition you see going out has DX Engineering logos on it. He provides radios, he provides antennas, he provides coax, all the infrastructure. He provides a massive amount of hardware for these expeditions. So that's one cool thing that you kind of know where maybe 10% of your money goes to. But one of the things I didn't know about Tim was he is highly involved in engaging youth in contesting. He has two really big contest stations. I don't know if everybody knows what a contest station is, but it's usually someone that has some really, really deep pockets. He puts up five, six, or half a dozen big towers. He has a big room with all state-of-the-art displays and um, radios, nice servers, great PCs. Then he also has an area that's kind of a kitchen, so you can make some food and stuff. He also has two or three or four bedrooms, so you can get some sleep for these really long contests. So that's what a contest station is kind of built out of. In other words, that's when you're going for a big contest station. Um, so he has two of these out there. So he's been really involved in trying to encourage youth to get involved. So he's created some programs for youth to learn about what CW is, what contesting is, what expeditions are about. He had one gal that he kind of bragged about. So she was, I don't know, 16, 17, something like that. She picked up, kids at that age can pick up CW real easy. She picked up CW real easy. Then she started teaching other kids CW. Then she got involved with teaching it over the air and a bunch of other permutations where she is the CW queen when it comes to contesting. She's the go-to gal, 17-year-old kid that's basically one of their go-to people for filling the CW position for a major contest. The other thing, there's some other groups out there that are also working along another program that um, for these big expeditions, um, all the planning, it's an art form on how you plan for these big expeditions. And it's a huge, huge amount of stuff that goes on to do all this planning for. It's not just figuring out what antennas, what boat, what flights, what equipment to bring along. There's a lot of things you have to figure out. All the food, you have to select the right kind of operators, the ones that get along with each other. You have to also think about what you get for propagation, the antennas you use on the particular island, what kind of support people you have for these things. So it's a daunting task to work through the matrix of all the decisions that have to be made for a major expedition. So, we have just a handful of guys that know how to put together an expedition. So that's a craft once these guys move on to the, afterlife for hams. Who's going to pick up that torch? So there have this program where they bring kids along, they teach them about contesting, they teach them about DXing. The guys that kind of excel in that and want to go further, they will bind them to one of these major expeditions. There's some stepping stones along the way, but where on this per individual, this kid gets to be in all the planning meetings, all the um, Zoom meetings. They get together when they're pulling the equipment together and testing it to make sure it works right. So, one of the things I mentioned, George there, one of the things that he does on all of his major expedition, he loads up his boat with all the equipment. The first thing they do is do a test run. They go off to some funky local island. They unload everything. They set it up. They make sure it works. They run it for a couple days, and then they bring everything back up. They do a post-mortem to figure out what they forgot and left home or what they could do better, simplify it, make it faster to take and put together. So that's one of the things that they do as far as a lot of testing on these major expeditions to make sure that someone didn't forget to bring a special little screw for some in particular worthy reason. Um, so these youth are getting built in so they learn about these expeditions, and these are the new people that are going to be coming along replacing the older people that can no longer do that anymore. Oh, another cute thing is that there's several of these entities out here that are actually building contest stations specifically built for youth to learn how to do contesting and DXing, but specific stations just for youth. Well, let's see. I've already covered that slide there, my last talk. So let's move on to another subject. I promise we're getting close to the end here. So Beauvais Island, that's number 10, I think, on the most wanted list. It seems like every couple of years there's always someone that wants to go out there and try and activate Beauvais. About 4 years ago, there's a group that went down there, and they didn't even get off onto the island there. They had boat problems, and they had to get saved by going back up to Johannesburg, not Johannesburg, Cape Town. So Beauvais's coming up February 1. Oh, that one that I was just talking about, uh, they actually left way too late. February 1 is the latest you ever want to go for an expedition in the Antarctic area. By the time you get into March, that is um, The first 2 weeks you might be able to survive. By the time you end up in the second week of March, that area is uninhabitable. And so some of these guys just delayed and got off way too late, and they ran into all kinds of problems. So this next expedition for next year is supposed to launch on February 1. The budget on that is $1.65 million, the most expensive expedition so far. So that's what's making my big 10 most wanted list at this point in time. Of course, there's an international team of people out there. They plan on departing and returning to Cape Town. So it's a little different way rather than going through Ushuaia or Punta Dorenas. They plan on using a helicopter to move things from the boat back off to the island. Um, they're going to be building 2 camps. I have yet to find any information that explains what the delineation, what the difference is between the 2 camps, but there'll be 2 camps setting up. And it's supposed to last for 21 days, so that's a long time on the island there. We also know in past expeditions where they did use a helicopter, um, when they first got to the island, they had to wait like 3 or 4 or 5 days before the winds died down that they could use the helicopter. Once they got everything onto the land and they did their expedition stuff and they were pulling everything back off the very last load, the winds came up and they couldn't get the team of, I don't remember, 4 or 5 people that were stuck on the island overnight. All the stuff was already packed up. They had to unpack some of the stuff so they had some shielding from the weather there until weather broke again late the next day for them to come back in and get rescued off the island. So that's coming up. Um, this was a big discussion, big discussion. DXCC honor roll, unobtainable. Right now, it is nobody that hasn't already got it. You are very, very likely not to be able to get it. So there are 430 DX entities out there. You need 331 entities to get the that are required to get the honor roll. That's the holy grail. It's a lifelong achievement. That's just it's really crazy to get that. So right now there are about 15 to 17 DX entities out there that may never be activated again. So well, to pull them off the list, but there's still possibilities. Some of this rib stuff has really opened up new horizons. But at this point in time, there's a whole lot of people out there that just can't end up finish getting the last couple entities out there to be able to move up to getting that honor roll. So one of and there's a lot of discussion on this was, you the guys that have already made honor roll, they don't want to relent and back off on lessening the requirements. They said they made it, their um, award stands right now. So the only compromise that we kind of came up with out of that whole long discussion is in the future we may see different levels of the honor roll. So there will be some different leveling that will not pull out any of these entities, but means that that 331, there's a different award level that's going to be smaller than that. Good discussion. Really cool to see these big old guys out there, these heavy hitters, doing some really tough discussion on it. Of course, in this kind of event, lots of raffle prizes, hourly drawings, tons of really high-end equipment being given away from both ICOM, Electrocraft, and Flex. Both these guys have really super good radios and lots of stuff that got given away. So the IDX future, not good news. So the convention has been sponsored by the Northern and Southern California DX clubs for many, many years. Unfortunately, the Southern California club has disbanded. So this is a situation where everybody got older and older and older. The club members kept dying off and dying off. They weren't bringing in new club people, younger people, to restock what what they had for people in there. So finally I got to the end there where the last dying person turned out the lights and the Southern California DX Club disappeared. This uh, event that I was at for this year was put on by the Northern California Club, and they said they just don't have the bandwidth to get this done. There needs to be a lot more sponsors, a lot more help out there from other clubs to make this happening. So at this point in time, the official saying is that this was the last international DX convention that's going to happen. There are some other discussions talking about reconstituting the event, of course, in a smaller way, in a different way, and but we'll just have to wait and see what's going to happen on that. So that's going to be a huge, huge loss for the DX and contesting community. So in summary, this program was only a small nibble of information presented. When you go step foot and get involved with one of these types of high-end get-togethers, you better be able to figure out how to drink from a fire hose because there's a lot of information and you get to rub shoulders with the top guys out there and you better think about the kinds of questions that you want to answer. It's kind of like that. I always say that getting that extra um, um, license doesn't mean that you get a whole bunch of extra privileges, but it does mean you get to ask some interesting questions. You've got a lot of knowledge. You need to have knowledge to get into some of this stuff to really understand what some of this really means. But at the end of it, everyone should have an opportunity to attend this kind of convention. It is real super, real hoot, really cool. Anyway, questions on all of that?
Mike. So there's a couple of things. One, what was I going to say? Yeah, so on Morse Runner, I had a really difficult time finding it, but I finally found there's a new version of it that had been because let me back up. There, it was for many years. It was never touched. It was never modernized. I think it was originally written back 20 something years ago,
Yep.
and it was working just fine up until like Windows XP, maybe Windows 7. And then if people, when Windows 10 came out, a lot of people had difficulties, installing it on Windows 10 and making it work right. And then, you can go to Linux and you can run it kind of under Wine if you really know what you're doing.
Hmm.
But basically, it was, a little bit of a problem. So now they have a new version. I think I don't know if it's the original author of the software that rewrote it or modernized it for up to Windows 11. And so I know this wouldn't interest anybody except maybe Ron, but it is a great program for learning how to, contest basically in CW. That's one thing. And on the youth side of things, have you ever heard of this kid, Ethan? Ethan Looney? Recently got
Yeah.
his license back in the summer with my class. He was tech. First day out of he got his license, his call sign. He texted me and he said he wants to get on 10 meters on sideband, which is the first time I've ever seen a technician want to do that. We did. I made it possible for him to do all that with ICOM 7300 that I lent him, and anyway, outcome is this kid is now, and it's only been 6 months, or no, what, 8 months since he's been licensed. This is one of the kids that I think this guy, K3LR, would love to speak with because he's created a club for the state of Oregon for youth, under 26, 26 and under. He's already got, I think, 50 members, a lot of no, I mean, not OSU, U of O, the Ham Club at U of O, plus some of the members at OSU, Ham Club, and some other kids around the state. And he's already set up the club. He wants to work with me to make Alcy a contest station where eventually we would install a Flex radio there. And kids can go online and go on that Flex radio. And once we get, it all set up with a Yagi and so forth, it could be kind of a nice little contest station there as well. So he's like super gung ho about getting all kinds of different aspects of ham radio. I think, and by the way, he's been invited to speak at CPAC already. So he's gonna be one of the speakers, and he's gonna talk about youth, and getting youth involved in ham radio. He's 15 years old. Okay,
Mhm.
I forgot to mention that. He's only 15. And so he's at South Albany. I mean, he's a homeschooled kid, but he is affiliated with South Albany High, where he tried to create a club there, but he couldn't get a sponsor, so he decided to just do it on his own. And we're going to try to get the ARDC to fund some, like get us the money to buy the Flex radio. And because right now he goes on, he uses these remote radios around the world. I forget how he does it, but he can do it for free. And
Mhm.
he can, so he's already got DXCC. I can't remember how many countries he's worked already, both FT8 and sideband. I mean, the kid's just unbelievable. So this is a kid you really want to talk to.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
That's so cool to hear that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. The kid's, yeah, he's going to go very far, and hopefully he'll drag a lot of other kids along with him.
That's the hope is that,
Yeah.
yeah, I was t telling you about that one gal there that's the CQ or the CW queen.
Yeah. I'd love to meet her.
And that's the same thing that they find is that once you find someone that really gets into it, they drag along a whole bunch of other peers.
Yes. It takes a kid to interest the other kids because if you try to talk to them, they're going to look at you like, you're my grandfather's age. I don't care what you like. But
That's
if you
right.
have a kid who's into it, who's their age and they're kind of what's the word? Well, they're contemporary.
Yep.
They're much more prone to, or at least willing to kind of like check into it and stuff like that. So, and plus we're getting more young people now. We are coming to the exam sessions. The average age, I think, is actually going down, which is good. There
Good. Yep.
a lot of kids who college kids and mostly college kids age. I don't know what's getting them into it. I asked them, I said, why do you want to do it? And they tell me, oh, we have a project, we're doing a special robotics thing and we need our ham radio license for that. And things like,
Hmm.
stuff like that. So, but that gets them into the hobby. See?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So contesting would
Excellent.
be very cool. I offered to bring Ethan up to 7QP, but his parents won't let me do it. But that would be a perfect opportunity. I hope maybe next year. He's going to be turning 16 in June, and then yeah, maybe next year they'll be
Hmm.
willing. And then he'd love to get into that kind of a contest.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, another thing you could do is invite them over for a field day so you
Yeah,
can see what we do with the antennas
we
and
already
stuff.
talked about that idea. So yeah, definitely we'll come to that.
But actually, 7QP is so much more.
I know.
Yep.
Well, maybe next year.
Hey,
Yep. Mm.
so I'll put a quick plug out. When I was back in Pennsylvania during my between Oregon hiatus, um, I, we had a young boy come up with his grandfather, and his grandfather was licensed, and he was another homeschool young boy. He was traveling from Florida to go see his grandfather in Pennsylvania, and he's like, "Hey, we have field day. Why don't you come check it out?" And he just had his tech license for like 3 months,
Oh, jeez.
and so he's over there, and he's like, I don't know, 11, and he's already been to like
Hmm.
NASA space camp. He's real techie, real interested in all
Wow.
these different things that cross over into communications. His name was Max. And so I'm like, I'm putting this kid through the ringer. I'm going to just give him everything he wants. And so I'm like, Max, this is what's happening over here. I was just like, I didn't even touch a microphone all day, right? It was one of those field days.
Mm.
Um, and he goes, how'd you like to operate HF? And he's like, oh, right. And so he sits down and put him on 80 meters, this little tiny voice. He racked up more than half the context of the
Wow,
entire phone operations.
that is great.
He
That's great.
literally 52% of the phone contacts were him.
They probably heard his voice and they all piled up on him.
Yep, they did. And
Yeah.
it was really great. We actually he came to the meeting the next month, you know, like July. I invited him, say, hey, come on by the meeting, because we were meeting at the same park, and I had a little certificate, you know, to give him, you know, credit for, you know, for doing this, and he put it in his little homeschool folder and under science and technology.
That's great.
Something I wanted to throw out there, Mike, is early on in the slides, you were talking about the number of QSOs per hour. And
Mhm.
with the POTA, I think my best is around 103. And
Good.
I I can't keep up with the logging at that speed. So I can't imagine getting up, you know, 200 or 300. It's like, okay, even if it was perfect copy and just stacked up, it's like I don't even know that I could log that fast.
Yeah, that's a big factor.
Yep,
Yep.
that sure is.
Yeah.
And there's guys that they can split their brain and split what's going on and do that multitasking where they can be logging one QSO while they're confirming another QSO.
Or, you know, Ron, what you could do is just set out an audio recorder and log it later.
Yeah, right.
Well, you have to get the timestamp right.
You do. Yeah. All right, Mike, thanks for that wonderful dive into the Visalia DX convention and all the little things that go into making a contest work, especially the rib. That's fabulous. What a great idea to be able to you know, get to those places that don't allow human traffic, you know, foot traffic and, you know, pollutions and whatever humans leave behind, right?
Mhm.
So disturbing nature, etc. That's great.
Yeah,
All right.
it's some of the same kind of stuff we left on the moon when we visited it.
And we'll visit again.
Okay. Any other questions for Mike on the presentation? Otherwise, I'll go on to some of the usual reports here.